The betrayal in a whisper. Attention. Lovers of mystery and intrigue, stop what you're doing and subscribe right now. You think love can conquer all? Think again. Hit that like button and leave a comment below. Are you ready to discover a story of betrayal that will leave you breathless? The first crack in Marina Hayes' heart didn't come with a shout, but with a whisper she overheard from her own husband. "She's holding me back," Richard Hayes said into his phone, his voice low but filled with resentment. He didn't know Marina was in the hallway, her hands still damp from washing dishes, and her breath caught somewhere between her lungs and her throat. It wasn't the words that hurt the most, but the cold certainty in his tone. The way he spoke of her as if she were an obstacle, not a partner. For 7 years, Marina had lived in quiet devotion. She traded the glamorous chaos of boardrooms for bake sales and couture for clearance racks. She tended a small garden, volunteered at the library, and cooked every meal from scratch in their modest house in a quiet London neighborhood. Her days were humble, predictable, and until recently, full of love. Or so she thought. Richard had been the center of her universe, handsome, ambitious, and blessed with a natural charm. He worked as a mid-level financial analyst in the city center. To his colleagues, he was a man on the rise. But to Marina, he was the man she thought had chosen her for her soul, not her status. He often lamented his bad luck, how with more capital and better connections, he could dominate the city. Marina listened patiently, never letting him suspect the truth. She could have given him a check large enough to buy the entire skyline he dreamed of, because Marina Hayes was not who she said she was. She was not an orphan from a forgotten corner of England. She was Marina da Costa, the sole heir to the da Costa Group, a conglomerate valued at over £200 billion, with investments in technology, real estate, and energy. The world knew the da Costa name, but Marina had hidden hers. She met Richard in her final year at a prestigious university in London, studying art history under a false name to escape the suffocating expectations of her multi-billionaire family. Her parents, Elijah and Helen da Costa, had died in a private plane crash when she was 18, leaving her in the care of her formidable grandmother, Augusta da Costa. Overwhelmed by the loss and the crushing weight of her inheritance, Marina longed for anonymity. She wanted a love free from the entanglements of wealth and influence. Richard had seemed like a dream, a scholarship student with fire in his eyes, who talked to her as if she were a person, not a purse. When he proposed a modest life together, far from the relentless glare of high society, Marina accepted with a sense of relief. She placed her entire fortune in a blind trust, accessible only through her family's lawyer, Xavier Santos, and told Richard she had nothing more than her heart to give. For years, she believed she had made the right decision. They built a life filled with small rituals, coffee together in the morning, long walks in the park on Sundays, handwritten notes tucked into his lunch. Richard seemed content, until he wasn't. The shift began subtly. He complained about her outdated clothes, about how they couldn't afford vacations, about what his colleagues were bragging about. He compared her to his friends' wives, women draped in diamonds, with dresses worth more than their houses. "Did you see Daniel's fiancée's ring?" he'd say after work events. "Must be 10 carats. Her dad's a shipping magnate in Singapore." Then his eyes would drop to Marina's simple gold wedding band, and his lips would curl, just a little. Still, Marina loved him. She convinced herself it was stress, that as soon as his career took off, they would be happy again. But the bitterness in his voice grew sharper, the gaps in their connection wider. Then came the day she heard him on the phone. "She's holding me back," his tone, filled with contempt, repeated. "If I had someone with real connections, I could be closing multi-million-pound deals." Marina froze in the hallway, her mind buzzing. He didn't know the someone he wanted was the woman standing 10 feet away. He didn't know that every paid bill, every home-cooked meal, every ounce of stability in his life had been underwritten by a woman who could have bought and sold the entire firm he worked for. That night, she sat on the edge of the bed, watching Richard sleep. The moonlight outlined the curve of his jaw, the same face she had once cradled in her hands, believing she had found her forever. But now she saw him differently. She saw the ambition that had once attracted her twisting into greed, the love that once felt secure becoming something brittle and transactional. In the morning, she decided she wouldn't confront him. Not yet. She needed to be sure. Over the next few weeks, she watched him more closely. She noticed the long work dinners, the subtle scent of expensive perfume that wasn't hers on his shirts. She counted the lies, small and casual, about where he had been, who he had met. Lies that fell from his tongue as if they were natural. Then, on a Friday, he came home late, his tie askew, his hair smelling faintly of jasmine and champagne. "Big night," he said with a grin. "I closed a deal. You wouldn't understand." Marina smiled faintly, not because she didn't understand, but because she understood more than he could ever imagine. That night, as Richard slept, she opened her laptop and sent a secure message to Xavier Santos. She hadn't contacted her family's lawyer in 7 years, but the subject line was clear: activate protocol. Xavier's response came in minutes. Understood. Do you wish to proceed in full? Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. As soon as she replied, there would be no turning back. But the image of Richard hunched over his phone, talking about her like a weight around his neck, burned in her mind. "Yes," she wrote. "Prepare everything." The next morning, she served Richard his coffee. She listened to him talk about a colleague's lavish engagement party and hid her fury behind a quiet smile. He didn't notice the subtle shift in her eyes, the way she measured every word before she spoke, because Marina was no longer just his wife. She was a woman preparing for war, and the man across the table had no idea that the empire he craved was already hers to command. In less than a month, he would find out. What would you do in Marina's situation? Confront Richard immediately or follow her plan? Let us know your opinion in the comments. The fall. The first time Marina saw them together was on a Tuesday afternoon in early spring. The air still held a winter chill, but the city streets were alive with the hum of rush hour. She had just finished her library volunteering when she saw Richard across the street, standing in the doorway of an exclusive wine bar. He wasn't alone. The woman was striking, with long dark hair falling over the shoulders of a camel-colored coat and red lips that caught the glow of the streetlights. She leaned in as Richard spoke, laughing in a way that made her head tilt back, her hand brushing his arm. Marina stopped walking. She could have told herself it was a client, a work friend, but the way Richard looked at her, his eyes fixed and a soft smile on his face, was not the way a man looked at a colleague. Marina turned away before they could see her, walking quickly in the opposite direction. Her heart wasn't pounding from shock. She had suspected. No. What she felt now was something colder, the confirmation she needed. That night, as Richard worked late, she sat at their small kitchen table with her laptop, reviewing public records. The woman's name was Elise Norton. She worked as a junior partner at an elite investment firm, the kind that thrived on high-profile connections. Her online photos showed her at charity galas, rooftop parties, always with a glass of champagne in her hand. Marina took note of the details, saving them in a private file. The next day, she made her first move. Sipping tea at a quiet cafe, she met with Xavier Santos. The lawyer had aged in the years since she had last seen him, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. "I want the trust fund ready," she said. Everything liquidated, if necessary. Xavier leaned back in his chair. That will create a stir, Marina. A liquidation of that size that someone will notice. Let them, she said calmly. By the time anyone understands, it will be too late. Xavier studied her for a long moment, then nodded. And Richard? He doesn't know yet. He won't until I'm ready. Over the next 2 weeks, Marina lived a double life. To Richard, she was still the dutiful wife. Cooking, smiling, asking about his day. In reality, she was assembling a team. She discreetly reached out to her family's old contacts, a PR strategist who owed her grandmother a favor, a discreet private investigator, a security consultant who once worked for the DaCosta Group. To each of them, she said only what they needed to know. The investigator returned with photos in a few days. Richard and Elise in a hotel lobby. Richard brushing a strand of hair from her face. Elise slipping her hand into his as they walked to a car. Each image was time-stamped, and each one was a nail in the coffin of their marriage. Marina didn't cry. She didn't even feel the rage she had felt before. It was as if her emotions had crystallized into something hard and precise. Each photo went into the file. Every text message she intercepted through the investigator's legal methods was documented, cataloged, and stored, in both digital and physical form. The real blow came on a Friday night. Richard had told her he was at a work dinner. In reality, he was at the Phoenix Hotel, a rooftop restaurant famous for its panoramic city views, and even more famous for its wait list. Elise was with him. The PR strategist Marina had hired was already there, sitting at the bar with a clear view. The strategist's phone camera captured the moment Richard presented her with a small velvet box. The ring inside sparkled under the restaurant's warm lights, large enough to attract the attention of all the nearby patrons. Elise's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with a practiced surprise. Richard slipped the ring on her finger, oblivious to the fact that every angle of the scene was being recorded. The strategist sent the video to Marina within minutes. She watched it once, then again. Her hands didn't tremble. In fact, they held steady. This was no longer just infidelity. This was public, and soon it would be public on her own terms. The next morning over breakfast, Richard acted as if nothing had happened. He talked about his plans for the weekend, a possible promotion at work. Marina nodded in all the right places, sipping her coffee, hiding the faintest smile behind the rim of her mug. By Monday, she had transferred the funds from the trust fund to new accounts, under her full control. Xavier handled the legal complexity, ensuring every move was flawless. At the same time, the PR strategist began to plant subtle rumors through social circles, whispers of a major acquisition, a DaCosta family name reappearing discreetly in the business press. Richard didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying his secret romance, too convinced of his own cleverness. One afternoon, Marina overheard him on the phone again. This time, he was talking to Elise. "She's so complacent," he said. "She has no ambition. She'd never survive in my world. You, on the other hand, you understand power." Marina closed her eyes, letting the words settle into the steel she was forging within herself. The great reveal. With her evidence stacked and her resources in place, Marina was ready for the next step. But she knew that patience was her greatest weapon. Every day she stayed silent was another day Richard walked deeper into the trap. It was a Thursday afternoon when she received the call that would accelerate everything. It came from an old acquaintance from the London philanthropic circuit. "Marina, I heard you're coming to the Marquis de Vega Gala next month. I can't wait to see you." Marina had not planned to go. The Marquis de Vega Gala was one of the most exclusive events in the city, a magnet for the rich and ambitious. But now she saw its potential. Richard had always dreamed of being invited, but he had never been on the list. Elise, however, would give anything to be seen there. "Of course," Marina replied smoothly. "I'll be there." She hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long moment. The gala would be the perfect stage. By then, her re-emergence as a DaCosta would be well on its way. By then, the right people would know exactly who she was and exactly who Richard had cast aside. She imagined herself walking into that ballroom, the chandeliers glittering, conversations stopping as faces turned to her, Elise's smile faltering, Richard's expression shifting from confusion to dawning horror. It was almost time, but first she needed to make sure that when Richard fell, he wouldn't just lose her. He would lose everything. The weeks leading up to the Marquis de Vega gala unfolded like a chess match. Only Marina knew she was playing. Every move was deliberate, every step calculated to prepare Richard for a fall he would never see coming. Her first move was to secure allies. Xavier introduced her to two members of the DaCosta Group's board who had always respected her parents. One controlled significant shares in the company's energy sector, the other in its tech division. During a discreet lunch at a private club, Marina explained her plan to them. Not the personal betrayal, but the business angle. "A leadership shakeup is coming," she told them. "I intend to be ready when it happens." Both men agreed to back her. Her second move was financial. She discreetly invested in a series of strategic acquisitions through holding companies registered under different names. Richard didn't know it, but the rumors he was hearing at work about mysterious investors buying up assets in his industry all led back to her. The very ground beneath his career was shifting, and he was too busy taking his mistress to dinner to notice. At home, she played her part to perfection. She asked about his day, laughed in all the right places, and even cooked his favorite meals. It was a performance that would have fooled anyone but the actress herself. Behind the quiet smile, she was memorizing his habits, noting every lie, every absence, every financial transaction he tried to hide. The private investigator found something Marina had suspected, but not confirmed. Richard had opened a separate bank account. It wasn't much yet, but the deposits were suspiciously timed to his meetings with clients. Marina didn't confront him. She simply added the bank statements to her growing file. Then came the first sign. On a Thursday, Richard came home later than usual, irritation etched on his face. "Someone's been snooping around the office," he said, throwing his briefcase on the sofa. "Asking questions about me, about my future plans. You know anything about that?" Marina didn't look up from the book she held. "Why would I?" she asked. Her tone soft. He studied her for a moment, as if trying to read something beneath her calm. "Just a coincidence. That's all." She offered him a small smile. "Maybe someone's finally noticing all your hard work." If he heard the faint trace of irony in her voice, he didn't comment. The next week, Marina made a subtle but crucial adjustment. She moved most of her personal belongings, including her heirlooms and irreplaceable documents, into a secure storage facility under her legal name, Marina DaCosta. Richard didn't notice. What he did notice, however, was that her appearance was changing. She began wearing tailored dresses again, subtle but undeniably expensive. Jewels that had been stored away for years now sparkled on her wrists and neck. When he asked about it, she shrugged. "Thought I'd update my wardrobe for the gala." "The gala?" His brow furrowed. "What gala?" "The Marquis de Vega gala," she said, sipping her tea as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "I was invited." He looked at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. Those people don't even know who you are." Her lips curled into a soft, inscrutable smile. "You'd be surprised who remembers me." From that moment on, Richard's curiosity turned into something sharper. He began asking more questions about her friends, her schedule, even her phone calls. But Marina had been raised in the DaCosta world. She knew how to keep her secrets. Every answer she gave was just true enough to sound convincing, but vague enough to reveal nothing. Meanwhile, Elise was making her own preparations for the gala. The investigator reported that she had been telling her friends she expected Richard to propose to her officially soon, claiming he was going to leave his wife after the event. Marina saved those voice messages too. As the date approached, the Pease strategist executed the final phase of Marina's public reemergence. Articles began to appear in business columns about an influential heiress returning to the corporate scene. The articles didn't name her directly, but hinted strongly, citing her education, her family history, and her role in upcoming acquisitions. It was enough to spark speculation among London's elite. One night, just a week before the gala, Richard came home unusually early. He stopped in the doorway of her room, watching her as she organized papers into an elegant leather folder. "You've been different lately," he said finally. Marina looked up at his open expression. "How so?" "More confident, put together, busy with things you don't talk about." She tilted her head. "Isn't that what you wanted? Someone with ambition?" The question hung between them, sharper than either of them expected. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it again. "Just don't forget who's always been here for you," he said, the words more of a warning than a comfort. When he left the room, Marina allowed herself a single deep breath. She was starting to feel it. The shift in balance, the shift in control. But he still had no idea how far she had gone. On the morning of the gala, Marina stood in front of her mirror. The final dress she had chosen hung on the chair. It was a custom-made piece, designed for her by a friend in Paris. Elegant, commanding, and impossible to ignore. She fastened a diamond necklace at her throat, one that had belonged to her grandmother. Her phone vibrated. It was Xavier. "Everything is in place. Tonight's the night." She sent him a single reply. "Make sure the photographers are ready." By night, the ballroom of the Tivoli Hotel would glow with London's most powerful. Elise would be there, waiting for a proposal. Richard would be there, expecting admiration. And Marina would be there to deliver something else entirely. Because once the lights hit her, there would be no turning back. What would you do if you had the same power as Marina? Would you use the information for revenge or to protect yourself? Leave your opinion in the comments. The verdict, the grand ballroom of the Tivoli Hotel, was resplendent under crystal chandeliers. The air was alive with the hum of London's elite. Silk dresses glided over polished marble, the scent of roses and expensive perfume mingling in the air. Waiters moved among conversational groups, balancing trays of champagne flutes that caught the light like tiny suns. Richard stood near the entrance with Elise at his side, looking around as if he had finally arrived where he belonged. Elise wore a champagne-colored dress with a slit that drew more than a few stares, her hand possessively wrapped around his arm. She leaned in and whispered, "You're going to introduce me to the Marquis de Vega tonight, right?" Richard smiled. "Just stay close. They'll know who we are very soon." What he didn't know was that the Marquis de Vega already knew exactly who was arriving. And it wasn't him. The room stirred as the doors opened. A silence fell so suddenly it was almost audible, as if the orchestra had missed a beat. Marina entered. She wore a dress of rich emerald green silk that hugged her figure with an elegance money couldn't fake. The diamond necklace at her throat caught the light from the chandelier, scattering it across the room like a constellation. Her hair was swept into a polished chignon, a single diamond pin gleaming just above her ear. Every step she took seemed to part the crowd effortlessly, and she wasn't alone. At her side walked Simon Grant, CEO of Grant Holdings, one of London's most powerful financiers, and a close friend of her late father. Marina smiled as she moved through the crowd, her arm linked with Simon's. Conversations were cut off mid-sentence. Eyes followed her. Whispers ran through the room. Richard's smile faltered. He blinked, as if unsure his eyes were telling him the truth. Elise's fingers tightened on his arm. Who is she? He didn't answer. Simon guided Marina to the center of the ballroom. The hosts of the gala themselves greeted her warmly, as if she were an old friend. Glasses clinked. A photographer's flash went off. Then another. In a matter of minutes, the unspoken hierarchy of the room had shifted. Marina was no longer the quiet wife no one noticed. She was the guest everyone wanted to be seen with. Richard's pulse quickened. He recognized that necklace. Once he had asked about it years ago, and Marina had told him it was a family heirloom, nothing valuable. Now he was starting to understand just how in the dark he had been. When Simon excused himself to speak with the mayor, Marina found herself face to face with her husband. Marina. His voice was low and his smile was tight. What are you doing here? Her gaze swept over him with cold precision. Enjoying the night, Elise shifted uncomfortably beside him. You didn't say your wife was invited. Marina's eyes met hers, steady and knowing. You must be Elise. I've heard so much about you. Elise's lips parted, then closed again. Something in Marina's tone, polite but sharp as glass, left her without a retort. Before Richard could recover, the matriarch of the Marquis de Vega family approached, linking her arm with Marina's. Darling, they're ready for you. For me? Richard repeated, confusion flickering in his eyes. Yes, the matriarch said, giving him a brief look before turning to Marina. The keynote speech. We're delighted you accepted to speak. The Da Costa name that means so much to our cause. Richard stood still. Elise's head turned to him, but her eyes were fixed on Marina. Da Costa, she repeated, the word slow as if trying to grasp its size. Marina's smile was flawless. I guess it was time you knew, Richard. The next 20 minutes were a masterclass in quiet power. Marina took to the stage, speaking effortlessly about philanthropy, innovation, and the importance of strategic investment in London's future. Her voice was firm. Her posture was regal. Her presence was magnetic. The crowd hung on her every word. The cameras flashed. Every influential figure in the room now knew her name, and, by extension, knew exactly who Richard had been married to all along. From his spot near the back, Richard felt a knot in his stomach. Elise's grip on his arm had loosened. Her eyes darted around the room, registering the shift in how people looked at them, or rather, didn't look at them at all. Now, they were invisible, and Marina was the center of gravity. When the speech ended, applause echoed through the ballroom. Marina descended from the stage into a whirlwind of handshakes and business card exchanges. Richard tried to intercept her, but Simon Grant was already at her side again, guiding her into a circle of CEOs and politicians. When Richard caught up, she was in the middle of a conversation with a governor. He touched her elbow lightly. We need to talk. Her eyes turned to him, cold and distant. Do we? Yes, he whispered, leaning in. What the hell was that about Da Costa? Since when? She cut him off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Since before I met you. But you never asked, did you? He opened his mouth, but she was already turning away, nodding to another guest, as if he didn't exist. Elise tugged on his arm. Richard, you didn't tell me she was— Shut up, he said, the weight of the night pressing down on him like a gag. Across the room, Marina accepted another glass of champagne. Her diamond necklace caught the light again, and she could feel Richard's stare burning into her back. But she didn't turn around. Not yet. Because tonight wasn't about confrontation. It was about planting the seed. And Richard was already starting to realize that whatever game he thought he was playing, he was desperately outmatched. And this was just the first move. The Marquis de Vega gala ended in a blur of brilliant conversations, clinking glasses, and discreet business deals. Marina left before midnight, not because she was tired, but because she knew Richard would follow. That was the point. Indeed, 15 minutes after she slipped into her waiting car, his black sedan pulled up behind her at the door of their suburban house. She could see him in the rearview mirror, his jaw tight, his shoulders rigid, moving with the restless energy of a man whose world had tilted in ways he couldn't control. She was already in the kitchen when the front door slammed shut. "Marina!" His voice echoed down the hallway, loud enough to startle the cat on the counter. "I'm in here," she called back, her tone exasperatingly calm. He appeared in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, his tie loosened, his eyes blazing. "What the hell was that tonight?" She tilted her head slightly, as if searching for clarity. "You'll have to be more specific." "Don't play dumb with me," he said. "DaCosta? You've been a DaCosta all this time? Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" 7 years, Marina. 7 years I've been looking for opportunities, struggling. While I what? She cut him off, her voice firm, sharper now. Lived the life you said you wanted? Supported you? Stayed silent when you complained about everything we didn't have, knowing full well I could have given you everything? He froze, taken aback by the precision of her words. "You lied to me." She let out a short, humorless laugh. "No, Richard, I didn't lie. You never asked. You were too busy looking for what you wanted to see to notice what was right in front of you." He took another step closer, lowering his voice as if the neighbors could hear. "You should have told me. We could have, You could have used it." She cut him off, her eyes fixed on his. "Paraded me to get connections, taken credit for deals you didn't make, spent it until nothing was left." His mouth opened, then closed again. For the first time, she saw hesitation in his eyes. "Marina, I'm your husband. We're supposed to share everything." Her smile was sharp. "Funny, you didn't share Elise with me." Color drained from his face. "This isn't about her." "Oh, it's exactly about her," she said, her voice soft but lethal. "You thought I was harmless. A quiet wife who would never know, never expect more. And because you thought that, you allowed yourself to believe you could have both, me at home and her on your arm." He took another step forward, the air between them tense as a wire. "You're twisting this. Elise means—" "Be careful," she warned, her gaze unwavering. "You're about to say something you can't take back." For a moment, the kitchen was silent, except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. Richard's eyes searched hers, looking for some trace of the woman he had known, the one who would listen, forgive, and mend his mistakes. But she was gone, replaced by someone he couldn't predict. Finally, he exhaled and took a step back. "So now what? You're going to leave me?" Her smile returned, slow and deliberate. "If I were going to leave you, Richard, you'd already be alone." "No, I think I'll stay. For now." He frowned. "For now." "Consider it a courtesy," she said, turning to the coffee machine, and as if the conversation was over. "Time for you to think about who you're dealing with." He didn't move for several seconds. When he finally left the kitchen, she could hear the creak of the stairs under his weight, each step heavier than the last. Marina poured herself a cup of coffee and carried it to the small desk in the corner. She opened her laptop, the glow illuminating her face as she reviewed the investigator's latest report. More photos, more messages, more ammunition. She didn't need to yell. She didn't need to throw him out. Not yet. The real damage wouldn't be done in this kitchen or in the privacy of their home. It would be done where it mattered most to Richard, in the eyes of everyone whose approval he craved. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from the PR strategist. "We've confirmed Elise is going to the Castle Foundation dinner next week. Shall we proceed?" Marina replied. "Absolutely." She leaned back in her chair, letting the aroma of the coffee envelop her like a slow-burning fuse. Richard thought the explosion had been tonight, but that was just the spark. When the fire hit him, there would be nothing left to save. What would you do if you had the same power as Marina? Use the information for revenge or to protect yourself? Leave your opinion in the comments. The fall from grace. The Castle Foundation dinner was more subdued than the Marquis de Vega gala, but no less exclusive. Held at the historic São Jorge Castle, it was the kind of event where every handshake could mean millions, and every whispered conversation had the potential to shift power in London. Marina arrived exactly 20 minutes past the start time, ensuring she was noticed without looking like she was trying. She wore a night blue silk dress, the fabric flowing around her like water, her grandmother's sapphire earrings catching the soft candlelight. This time, she came alone. She didn't need an escort. Her name was enough. Across the room, she saw Richard and Elise before they saw her. Elise wore a bright crimson dress that was a little too tight, her smile a little too bright. Richard played his part, attentive, confident, but there was a tension in his posture that Marina hadn't seen before. He was looking for her. She let them wait. Instead, she moved through the room with precision, greeting donors, exchanging pleasantries with political figures, stopping to be photographed with other board members. Every introduction included her full name, Marina da Costa Hayes. She saw the glint of recognition in people's eyes, the way conversations shifted when she spoke. Half an hour in, she finally approached them. Richard's face tightened. Elise's widened in surprise. "Marina," Richard said stiffly. "Richard, Elise." Marina's tone was warm, almost friendly. "You both look comfortable." Elise straightened, sensing the subtle barb beneath the words. "We were just talking about the auction later. Richard's going to bid on a trip to the Amalfi Coast for me." "Oh, is he?" Marina smiled, tilting her head. "How generous of you, Richard, considering your recent financial challenges." He stiffened. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course not," she replied softly, before turning to Elise. "I hear congratulations are in order. They say you're expecting an official change in your relationship soon." Elise's painted-on smile faltered. I don't like gossip." "No need," Marina said, her soft voice all the more cutting. "I already know." Before either of them could reply, the dinner bell chimed, and guests began to move towards the long banquet tables. Marina took her seat near the front, next to the evening's keynote speaker, a tech entrepreneur who had just signed a lucrative partnership with one of her holding companies. From her vantage point, she could see Richard and Elise several tables back. Elise's smile was gone now, her posture rigid. The real moment came during the auction. A week before, Marina had discreetly arranged for a special lot to be added, a weekend getaway to the Phoenix Hotel. The same rooftop hotel where Richard had secretly proposed to Elise. She had even provided the photograph for the display screen, one taken by her investigator, showing the exact moment Richard slipped the ring on Elise's finger. The image had been carefully cropped so that only their hands were visible, but the watch on Richard's wrist was unmistakable. When the lot came up on the screen, murmurs rippled through the room. Richard's face lost all color. Elise stared straight ahead, frozen. "Do I hear an opening bid of 10,000? The auctioneer said. Marina raised her paddle without hesitation. 10! Another bidder across the room joined in, and the number climbed. Richard kept his head down, but Marina could feel his stare burning into her. She didn't care if she won the lot. The point had already been made. When the hammer fell at 15,000 to another bidder, the image was already seared into the minds of half the room. During dessert, Richard finally approached her, his voice low, but filled with rage. "That was deliberate." Marina sipped her coffee. "If you're referring to my coming to dinner, yes, I was invited." "You know what I'm referring to." Her eyes met his, calm and unbreakable. "I've learned something, Richard. If you want to hurt someone, you don't shout. You let the truth do the work for you." He clenched his teeth. "What do you want from me?" She leaned in just enough for only him to hear. "Patience, because this is only the beginning." Leaving him there, she returned to her seat as the final speeches began. She didn't need to look back to know he was watching her, torn between fury and fear. Across the table, one of the Castle Foundation board members leaned in. "You know, when I heard a DaCosta was returning to London, I didn't expect this." Marina smiled faintly. Neither did he. The night ended with polite applause and discreet farewells. Outside, the cool night air enveloped her as she descended the stone steps. An elegant black car waited at the curb. Xavier's driver. She slid into the back seat, the city lights reflecting in the window. Her phone vibrated with a message from the investigator. "You'll want to see the footage from tonight." The police made a call after the auction. Very interesting. Marina's lips curved. Another piece for the file. Another step toward the inevitable. And soon, Richard wouldn't just feel like the walls were closing in on him. He would realize there was no way out. Do you think Richard deserves what's happening to him? Leave your opinion in the comments. On Monday morning, Richard could feel it. Something in the air at work had changed. Conversations stopped when he entered the break room. Colleagues avoided eye contact. His usually chatty assistant kept her answers short, and her gaze fixed on her computer. It didn't take long for him to find out why. Someone had circulated the photo from the Castle Foundation auction around the office, even though the image didn't show Elise's face. The watch and distinctive cufflinks Richard wore to the event were enough for people to connect the dots. At lunch, he was called into his supervisor's office. "Richard, the partners are concerned," she began carefully. "Between the merger complications and the image issues from your personal life, we've concluded that it's best we part ways." Richard's pulse quickened. "You're firing me?" "Your contract will be honored," she said, sliding a folder across the table. "But effective immediately, your position here is terminated." He was escorted out by security before lunch. When he arrived at his apartment, Elise was packing. "Where are you going?" he demanded. She didn't even stop folding a sequined dress into her suitcase. "You think I'm staying for this? Everyone is talking, Richard. I'm being frozen out of every circle I worked to get into. And now, you lost your job." "I can fix this," he insisted, though the words sounded empty even to him. She laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You can't fix this. She's dismantling you piece by piece, and you don't even know how deep she goes." "At least don't!" She zipped her suitcase. "Call me when you're not a sinking ship." She was gone in less than an hour. For the rest of the day, Richard sat in silence, the weight of everything pressing down on him. Phone calls from friends stopped. Emails went unanswered. Even his social media accounts were a graveyard of past boasts and unreturned messages. That night, there was a knock at the door. When he opened it, Marina was standing there in a simple black coat, her expression unreadable. "May I come in?" she asked. He stepped aside, not knowing what else to do. She entered slowly. Her gaze swept over the apartment, the expensive furniture, the empty champagne bottles, the half-packed boxes. "You've been busy," she said softly. "Why are you here?" His voice was hoarse. "To tell you something." She turned to face him. "Everything that happened, the gala, the dinner, the summit, that was just me pulling back the curtain. The rest you did to yourself." His jaw tightened. "You planned all this." "I prepared for it," she corrected. "The moment I saw you at that wine bar with her, I knew the man I thought I'd married didn't exist. So I stopped protecting you." Richard's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You could have just left me." She shook her head. "Leaving you would have been a gift. You didn't deserve one." He took a step towards her. "You wanted to ruin me?" "No," she said, her voice low and precise. I wanted you to understand that when you betray someone who gave you everything, the cost is everything you have left. The silence between them was heavy, filled with all the things he couldn't say. Apologies he didn't believe, excuses she wouldn't accept. Finally, she reached into her purse and took out an envelope. She set it on the counter. "This is your severance from the trust fund accounts. I'm cutting you off completely. Consider it the last payment you'll receive from me." He stared at the envelope, but didn't touch it. "What am I supposed to do now?" She met his eyes. "Survive, or don't. Either way, it's no longer my problem." With that, she turned and walked to the door. "Marina," he called out to her. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. "I never thought you'd do this to me," he said, his voice breaking a little. She looked over her shoulder. "That's because you never thought I could." The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving him in the dark, silent apartment. That night, Richard scrolled through his phone until he came to an old photo. The two of them, on their wedding day, smiling, oblivious to the future. He stared at it until the screen went black, the room around him shrinking into darkness. Across the city, Marina sat in her penthouse office reviewing the final documents for the launch of the new DaCosta Foundation. Her name had returned to its rightful place, and her reputation was stronger than ever. The people who mattered knew her story now, and they knew she had the strength to protect herself. But it wasn't over yet. There was one last stage, one public event, that would cement her return and leave Richard with nothing more than the memory of what he had lost. And when that night came, she would make sure it was unforgettable. 2 months later, the most anticipated event of the London season arrived, the DaCosta Foundation's relaunch gala. The invitations had been coveted for weeks, with only the city's most influential figures on the guest list. It was to be held at the historic Langston Hall, a venue reserved for the kind of moments that would be talked about for decades. For Marina, it was more than just a gala. It was the full restoration of her place in the world, on her own terms, with her own name. Every detail had been planned with precision, from the champagne imported from her family's French vineyards to the orchids flown in that morning. She arrived early, entering the grand ballroom in a floor-length gown of rich gold, a color that radiated strength and warmth. The sapphire pendant rested against her collarbone, glowing under the chandeliers. She moved through the final checks with her team, calm but electric inside. This night was hers. Guests began to arrive, the flash of cameras greeting each one. Politicians, CEOs, philanthropists, and old money families streamed in, eager to be seen in attendance. Marina greeted them with genuine warmth, introducing partners for the foundation's new initiatives. The press was everywhere, capturing the faces, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. And then, almost predictably, Richard appeared. He wasn't on the guest list, but he had found a way in. Likely through some desperate contact who owed him a favor. He wore a dark suit that didn't fit as well as it used to, and there was an edge of desperation in his eyes. He approached as she was speaking with the mayor. "Marina, can we talk?" She didn't break her smile, simply excused herself from the conversation. "You shouldn't be here, Richard. I just need 1 minute." She studied him for a moment. One minute." They stepped into a quieter corner of the ballroom. The music and chatter were still a soft hum around them. "I've been thinking," he began, his voice low. "I made mistakes, I know. But maybe, just maybe, we could start over." Her expression didn't change. "Richard, you didn't just break a promise. You broke the foundation of trust we stood on. And when it crumbled, you thought you could just build again on the same ground. You can't." He swallowed hard. "I've lost everything." "That was your choice," she said simply. Before he could respond, the event coordinator approached. "Marina DaCosta, we're ready for your speech." She turned to Richard. "Enjoy the rest of your night from the sidelines." She walked toward the stage as applause erupted. The ballroom lights softened. A single spotlight illuminated her as she approached the podium. "Good evening," she began. Her voice carried with quiet authority. "Tonight is about more than the relaunch of a foundation. It's about resilience, about taking back your voice when others tried to take it from you." She spoke of the foundation's projects, educational programs, grants for female entrepreneurs, community revitalization efforts. But woven into her words was a deeper message, one the crowd could feel. "There was a time," she said, "when I believed love meant hiding parts of myself to make someone else feel bigger. I was wrong. True partnership is not about dimming your light for someone else's comfort. It's about shining together and knowing that if someone can't stand in that light with you, they have no place in your future." The applause intensified, filling the ballroom like a wave. Cameras flashed. In the corner, Richard stood still, his face unreadable, as the crowd rose to its feet to give a standing ovation. When the speech ended, Marina descended into a sea of congratulations. Deals were discussed, promises were made, photos were taken. Her name, Marina da Costa, was on everyone's lips, no longer hidden, no longer tied to anyone but herself. At midnight, the ballroom was a whirlwind of music and laughter. Marina stood on the balcony, overlooking the harbor, the city lights shimmering below. Xavier joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "It's done," he said simply. She nodded. "It's just the beginning." They clinked glasses. She took a slow sip, feeling the cool air on her skin, the hum of satisfaction in her chest. Somewhere behind her, Richard had already left. His departure had gone unnoticed, and that was the final truth. He was no longer part of her story. Marina smiled to herself, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Because this wasn't just revenge. It was a rebirth. This is it, my friends. Our story has come full circle. And if you're still here with me, right now, watching to the end, I believe that something in this journey touched your heart in a way you didn't expect. Maybe it stirred a memory. Maybe it mirrored something you've gone through. Or maybe, just maybe, it simply reminded you of the strength you already carry within you. See, this wasn't just a story about betrayal and revenge. It was a story about resilience, about choosing not to let someone else's actions define your worth. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Marina could have broken, but instead, she chose to rebuild. Not for him, but for herself. There's another quote from Marcus Aurelius that I often think about. "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." That's exactly what we saw here. She didn't sink to Richard's level. She rose above him, taking back her life with dignity, power, and grace. Perhaps that is the real lesson for you and me. We can't always control what people do to us, but we can always choose our response. We can choose to heal, to grow, to stand taller than before. And in doing so, we become untouchable. So if you're going through something right now, a heartbreak, a betrayal, a loss, remember, you are stronger than you think. The pain you feel now is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of your comeback. If this journey moved you, even a little, I would love for you to hit the like button, share this video, and subscribe so we can continue to tell stories that speak to the heart. Because somewhere, someone needs to hear this next chapter. And maybe, just maybe, it's the exact hope you were waiting for. Thank you for joining me.